Contempt is one of the most corrosive forces in human relationships. Though often subtle, it is a highly effective defense mechanism used to protect the self from vulnerability, accountability, and discomfort. In personal relationships, professional environments, and even public discourse, contempt emerges not just as a spontaneous emotional reaction, but as a deliberate tool to evade responsibility. This article explores how contempt functions, why it surfaces in emotionally charged situations, and how it slowly erodes the foundation of trust and growth. Contempt is an emotional response marked by a mixture of anger, disgust, and superiority. Unlike rage, which is overt and explosive, contempt is cold, dismissive, and cutting. It can manifest in verbal sarcasm, a scoffing tone, dismissive gestures, eye-rolling, or the strategic use of silence. It signals not just disagreement, but disdain. Psychologically, contempt is often a defense mechanism that serves to distance the self from perceived emotional threats. When someone uses contempt, they are saying, "I refuse to be affected by you. I am above you." One of the key reasons contempt appears in conflict is to avoid ownership. Rather than admitting fault, acknowledging emotional harm, or accepting vulnerability, an individual may default to contempt to shift the power dynamic. Contempt removes the need to look inward. It places the blame externally, thereby relieving the individual of the pressure to change. Avoiding accountability also avoids personal growth and self-awareness. The more one uses contempt, the harder it becomes to relate to others authentically. In a friendship, one person might routinely mock the other's needs or concerns, laughing them off as ridiculous. Over time, the mocked friend will likely withdraw, and the friendship will wither from one-sided emotional effort. Contempt doesn't only occur between individuals, it appears in institutions and public culture. In workplaces, leadership may use contempt to shut down dissent, labeling workers as lazy or overly sensitive instead of addressing valid complaints. In politics, it shows up in the form of mockery toward marginalized voices, avoiding policy accountability by reducing critique to whining or entitlement. Media commentary often weaponizes contempt to avoid discussing real consequences, reducing complex debates to sound bites, memes, and sarcasm. This corrodes civil discourse and teaches people that whoever scoffs loudest wins, while responsibility evaporates. In a professional setting, a manager who missed a critical deadline might say to a concerned colleague, "You're always so dramatic about everything." This comment not only invalidates the colleague's concern, but also deflects attention away from the manager's failure. By dismissing the colleague as overly emotional, the manager avoids having to take responsibility for their mistake. Contempt offers a false sense of superiority. It tells the person using it that they are immune to emotional consequences, immune to error, and immune to dependency. This is especially appealing to individuals with fragile self-esteem or unresolved shame. The contempt allows them to occupy a psychological position where they never have to say, "I was wrong," or "I hurt you." A partner confronted about emotional neglect may respond with, "Oh, so now I'm the villain?" This sarcastic deflection shifts the narrative away from accountability and into one of exaggerated blame, allowing the partner to feel morally superior rather than introspective. Responsibility requires emotional labor. It involves reflection, ownership, and sometimes the uncomfortable process of repairing harm. Contempt, in contrast, demands nothing but withdrawal and attack. Where responsibility builds trust, contempt reinforces walls. Contempt is easier, faster, and often more satisfying in the short term. It delivers the illusion of resolution without doing the work. However, this shortcut has long-term consequences: damaged relationships, lost trust, and a deepening inability to form authentic connections. A parent who yells at their child out of stress might later say, "Kids these days are just too soft." Instead of apologizing or acknowledging their overreaction, the parent distances themselves from emotional accountability by belittling the child's response. Contempt serves multiple psychological functions. Emotional protection keeps the person from facing painful emotions like guilt, regret, or vulnerability. Control establishes dominance in the relationship, effectively silencing or disempowering the other. Projection offloads internal discomfort onto someone else. Avoidance prevents the need for dialogue, repair, or change. In many cases, contempt becomes a habitual response learned through family dynamics or cultural conditioning, especially in environments where emotional openness is seen as weakness. The short-term gain of avoiding responsibility comes with long-term damage. Erosion of trust. Contempt tells the other person they are unworthy of basic respect. Emotional isolation. While it may preserve ego, it destroys intimacy. History gives us numerous public figures who wielded contempt to maintain control. In courtrooms, defendants sometimes respond with sarcasm or belittlement to prosecutors, evading remorse by posturing superiority. In celebrity culture, some public apologies are so laced with smugness or blame-shifting that they reek of contempt, not repentance. Consider online platforms where influencers or creators mock criticism instead of engaging with it. Rather than asking if there's a valid point, contempt becomes armor. Haters gonna hate. That phrase may sound harmless, but it often shuts down any call for self-examination. Contempt can also be gendered. In some cultures, men are taught to express emotional disconnection through jokes, eye rolls, or silence. When confronted, they may accuse their partner of being crazy, needy, or too sensitive, a dismissive tactic rooted in contempt. This allows them to avoid both accountability and vulnerability, reinforcing toxic relational cycles. Women may internalize contempt differently, turning it inward, minimizing their own pain, or responding with passive sarcasm to mask grief or unmet needs. Either way, contempt becomes a cover for emotional truths too raw to name directly. Children exposed to contempt learn quickly to silence their emotions. A teacher who responds to a student's struggle by saying, "You're just not trying hard enough," sends a clear message: struggle is weakness. In families, parents who mock or belittle their children in front of others create emotional insecurity that can follow them into adulthood. In classrooms and homes where contempt is normalized, students stop asking questions and children stop sharing feelings. The result is a generation raised to repress rather than express. These early experiences shape how people later handle conflict, trust, and emotional intimacy. In romantic dynamics, contempt is especially lethal. According to psychologist John Gottman, contempt is the #1 predictor of divorce. When eye rolls, sarcasm, or dismissive laughter replace dialogue, the relationship starts to rot from the inside. Partners who use contempt are often defending against deeper feelings of inadequacy or fear of abandonment. Rather than admit, "I'm hurt" or "I'm scared," they scoff, attack, or withdraw. The damage is subtle but cumulative. Trust erodes, safety disappears. Love can't grow where respect is missing. Breaking free from contempt requires first recognizing it as a defense, not a personality trait. This means asking difficult questions. What am I avoiding when I mock, belittle, or scoff? What would it mean to admit I caused harm? Can I sit with the discomfort of being wrong? Practicing responsibility involves pausing before reacting, reflecting instead of deflecting, apologizing sincerely when harm is caused, engaging in honest dialogue, even when uncomfortable. Cultivating empathy is essential. Contempt cannot survive in the presence of real understanding. When we see others as fully human with valid emotions and experiences, superiority melts and connection becomes possible. Contempt is not a sign of strength, intellect, or wit. It is a mask, a shield, worn to deflect emotional responsibility and avoid vulnerability. It offers short-term protection but long-term damage. Real maturity, real connection, and real peace come not through distancing but through owning our words, our actions, and their impact. To live free of contempt is not to be weak. It is to be courageous enough to face ourselves. When responsibility replaces contempt, relationships heal. When accountability is chosen over sarcasm, dignity is restored. And when we stop shielding ourselves from discomfort, we finally begin to grow.